What is your faith? Why are Islamic extremists so radical? Why does a supposedly peaceful religion create terrorism? Hamas is an armed group that effectively controls Gaza Strip and Palestine. Its goal was the destruction of Israel and the subsequent establishment of the Islamic State. In between the wars, they have fired thousands of rockets at Israel as well as at other armed groups. It has also killed Israelis and others through other methods of attack. Israel, on the other hand, has repeatedly bombed Hamas. Hamas is unique in its Islamic Sunni orientations. Islamism is an ideology that aims to build a state and a society based on Islamic law, and it is also the basis of Hamas's opposition to Palestinian peace. In the Islamic view, the entire Palestinian land, including Israel, is a donated land offered to God, and artificial cessions is not permitted. Furthermore, if infidels, in the case Jews, invaded the house of Islam, meaning the Islamic world, it is a duty of Muslims to defend it. Frankly, I am relieved. US President Trump had long warned that if Hamas did not release hostages by the time he took office, hell would break loose on the Middle East. The people of Gaza have already lived through a hellish environment. Also, we cannot be optimistic about the possibility of various problems that may arise after the ceasefire agreement take effect. We should first welcome it. For Israel, the battle against Hamas has not been easy. In addition to the fact that it became increasingly clear that destroying Hamas was militarily unfeasible, it must have been difficult because economic burden was also growing. In this context, the Trump's pressure may have worked rather well on the Israeli side. Israel was fighting a war that was suddenly started by terrorists and others on the early mornings of the Jewish holiday, the Thanksgiving Day. It was a war to protect its people and the territories as a minimum duty of a nation. Only democratic nation in the Middle East region and to protect universal human rights. The terrorists who breached the borders of the democratic sovereign state of Israel committed atrocities such as have never been seen in the modern history of mankind. They showed no hesitation on shootings, civilians, raping them, setting them on fire alive, mutilating their corpses, or taking them as hostages. Instead, they proudly broadcast their live coverages on social media and elsewhere, as if they wanted the world to see what they were doing. The victims of the atrocities were innocent people of all ages, genders, and ideologies who were completely incompatible with such inhuman ideology. Since the atrocities committed by Hamas, the president bias and violation of neutrality on the part of some UN agency has been demonstrated irrefutably and unequivocally. Leading UN agencies used misleading information and double standards to make claims about Israel's response and the state of the conflict in general. Political and official misinterpretations continued and became a source of misinformation and international legal proceedings against Israel. While anti-Israel attitudes are not new in UN bodies, this incident reveals that bias has taken root even at the highest levels, where neutrality and balance must be maintained. This undermining of the basic principle of the UN further exacerbated the problems. threatening not only Israel, but the unity of the UN and the international system as a whole. Israel continued to cooperate with UN agencies on a daily basis according to their specific mandates and in accordance with the strict standards of their respective agencies. It is the agencies and other employees who should be criticized for violating those standards and undermining the credibility of entire organization while continues to operate. Islamic organizations, Hamas has each face their greatest military and political challenges. For Hamas, it was a fight for survival. Hamas continued to insist that as long as Hamas fighters could pull the trigger on a gun or fire rockets under Israel, they were not defeated. In contrast, Israel's military power was overwhelming, but challenges it faced were more complex. I am very confused. Why does a supposedly peaceful religion go to extremist? What is the cause of so many terrorist attacks inspired by Islamic extremism? I trust the non-violent Muslims I know who are and are here who wants to hear the peaceful message of Quran. I believe the Quran is Islamic of peace, compassion, and pity, as do many Muslims. Quran is Islamic, not Al Qaeda and Hamas. Islam is a religion of peace, right? Are you saying that Islam is a religion of war, of violence, of fear, of aggressions, not of peace? That is not true. Do you think that the 1.6 billion believers around the world, the people around you, are supposed to be advocates and followers of the violent religion? Really? While some see Islam as their identity, a source of spiritual hope, satisfactions, a relief, by some, Islam is ignored, disliked, or stubborn. Its opponents of Islam seems to want to crush and divide the civilization of Islam itself. Some seems to be encouraging those who fear Islam and the debate of the unknowns and creating some kind of struggles. Some seems to be legitimizing their divisions and hatred. On the other hand, then, why don't the majority of Muslims around the world act like the politically inspired extremists of a very small and very limited group? When I read Quran, I see compassion, love, and justice, but some of it is also about war and violence. But it absolutely does not justify violence. I do not believe it at all. Islam as a faith that makes violence right. However, it is true that Islam may allow the fightings and violence in certain limited circumstances, and that a minority of Muslims may overstep it. However, it prohibited killings or innocent people, blowing oneself up under any circumstances. But this is nothing new in mainstream Islam. Reading scholars have been arguing that the same things for years. That one should never, never, ever wearing the kill people on the street and the buses or in the malls based on the Qurans. Some have largely ignored the context, understandings, interpretation, and reportings of the Quran and have cherry picked it as a part of it. There are 1.6 billion believers of various background and culture, ethnicities. Nonetheless, as the opponents of Islam want to generalize it, they then becomes opaque and wanted to win, stereotype debates and make things worse and worse. Suppose that one day the explosions and attacks were inspired by Islam? I don't think so, but suppose that they were, that those who caused the Times Square explosion that were also inspired by Islam. Suppose, for example, that attempted bombings of the American Airlines plane with explosives in its shoe was also caused by Islam. For example, hypothetically, if Israelis have expired these papers, and therefore Israel is a religion of war, not peace, then let me ask, what about the rest of the world? Then what on earth are the rest of them doing? Why is that there are only so few Muslims that understand the real religion as their opponent claims? Why don't the rest of them attack the struggle? Suppose that there are 1.6 billion suicide bombers in the world. Impossible, isn't that? For the sake of argument, let's say about 0.01% of Muslims in the world are suicide bombers, which means that the other 99.99% of Muslims are being ignored as a pigs. So, what does the other 99.99% do? Pick up what a tiny minority of the 0.01% did and blame the Muslims. Let's be realistic, the rest of the Muslims are not going to blow themselves up. No one would claim it to be a religious fighters and blow themselves up. The sense of loyalty, solidarity, and oneness towards land, blood, community that have supported traditional society seems to be being dismantled amid the structural changes in the society that have accompanied modernizations, buildings of nation states, globalizations. Under such circumstances, I believe that floating identities are being denounced and an excessive, exaggerated sense of community and solidarity is being homed through violence against others. Vague pride without substance that have been formed to feel people's sense of identity loss. And I believe that this is creating a dangerous situation that is leading people to violences. Some people called this a society of perverted dignity when considering the current global problem of suicide bombings, the relationship between these changes and social structure in individuals' consciousnesses and identity is an important point. There is also ambiguity in Islamic doctrines. I will also point out that these ambiguities give rise to differences in interpretations, and that this is one aspect from which radical truth emerges. Looking at the countries, I think that in addition to ambiguities of Islam and its flexibilities, there is also ambiguities among Muslims is in Islamic societies. On the other hand, however, there are strict religious and sectarian affiliation. As a matter of social positionings and status, it is not ambiguous at all, but as a matter of each Muslim's individual mind. The meanings of beings Muslims believer is actually quite ambiguous in terms of the boundaries and connotation. Japanese people's religious beliefs are generally quite lax. Other religious ones, they are very flexible, enjoy Christmas, visit temple and shrines, and so on. And the weddings are generally held in Christian churches. Also, some weddings are Shinto and funerals are held in Buddhism temple. It is a jumbled mixture of events and cultures, customs rather than religions. By comparison, in many other countries and the world, religion and the sect are quite strict in terms of personal conduct. Even more so in Middle Eastern Islamic societies, being a Muslim is quite strict as required. Therefore, people seem to think that all Muslims are extremely religious and live according to the rules of their sect. But is this really the case? I think it depends on each person. Of course, there are many deeply religious Muslims. However, I think that there are many Muslims who do not live their lives with a strong commitment to Muslims, and do not follow it strictly. Most Muslims do not become the believers of their own volitions, but are born there as a society positions and become Muslims by nature, not by choice. Then they live their social lives as believers according to their surroundings, which in many cases are in inertia. It is often matter of inertia. For example, when I was invited to stay at a Muslim person's home, the person who was enthusiastically talking about the beauty of Muslims as Islam in front of his family and friends would confess late at night after the family had gone to bed. Actually, I don't really like the Islams, he said. This was something that came out only after I had the deal then to talk about it. It was something would never have come out in a normal conversation, but there were some people like that. Especially among young people. There are many such people, and it seems to be a common pattern for them, suddenly transformed into devout believers as they got older. So, although they don't say out loud, and they may have done so, I sometimes wonder what their true feelings are. This in turn seems to drive the pressure for conformities in Muslims' Islamic society. In other words, in order to show they are devoted believers, they emphasize it in the community. There is a trend or pressure that is generated for those around them to do the same. That's why I feel. So, is the issue of prohibition. The fact is that there are Muslims who, in some countries, drink alcohol in hidings. For example, it depends on the person and the environment, but people are not that ascetic. When I boarded the airplane, Pakistanis workers took his seat, and the older man immediately began to talk about the beauty of Muslims, beauty of Islam as usual. However, the moment the plane took off, all the passengers, including the old man, stood up and ordered beer and wine from CA. Also, depending on the countries, some Muslims in the southern Philippines, after praying in the mosque, change into their casual clothes and go straight to a bar. Also, this is not only the Muslim problems, but also a problem of social backwardness, such as the suppression of sex. Well, it is more pronounced Muslim society since it is often not so oppressive in Christian towns. In this regard, there seems to be quite a bit of a backlash among the younger generation against the rigidity of the Islamic society. Of course, Islam is not only about the prohibition, There are people who break taboos, but believe in the existence of God and His teachings. There are many pious, pious people. There are those who believe that God is always trying to protect them and live a devotedly disciplined life. However, I do not suppose that this is necessary true of everyone. In any case, living in such a society, it is natural to make a distinction between what is honest and what is not. In Islamic societies and the Middle East, it seems to be a matter of course that people use both honesty and pretense. This kind of distinction is found in all societies, not just in the Middle East, but I suppose that distinction that is much greater in Islamic societies. There are a great many people in Islamic societies who emphasize the superiority of Islam. As one would expect, there are not many people who defended the group as brutal as a currently Islamic state, but there are few, certainly a few, who speak passionately about things that are offensive in their own way. However, this does not mean that they are extremists. They may speak strong words in a community, but in many cases they are only talking the talk. They would not put into the practice. Such ambiguity is one of the characteristics of Islamic societies, or societies with a strong peer pressure. I feel that dictatorships and the communist blocs of the past also have this aspect. Of course, there are all kinds of people in any world, and there are those who becomes extremist purely out of the true feelings, or There are those who become so while saving it themselves. Others are driven by peer pressures and become so by hard grip frogs mentality. It varies from person to person. But I suppose that from among these peoples, there are few who join extremist groups here and there. Also, when sectarian conflicts escalated, fighting groups can be born quite quickly.
Schlafe, mein Prinzchen, schlaf ein.
However, the majority of people live their lives and reality first. Even though there is a radical discourse and a Muslim community, most people will actually focus on their true intention and terms of action. A vigilant atmosphere. Belligerent atmospheres may prevail temporarily, but it will not last. It is difficult to compile statistics on this, and this is only my impression based on my own personal experience, but I'm sure that someone out there feels similarly. It may be difficult if a conversation is only superficial and formal. What are your true feelings? How about deepening the conversation with what are your true feelings? I highly recommend it that you have a long talk late at night with a local person in front of you. The situation in the Middle East has drastically changed due to the extremist group Islamic State (IS) and brutal terrorist attacks threatening the international community. What I felt during my international cultural exchange was the inequality of pride existed in the world alongside economic inequality. Western countries are attractive and have much to learn from each other, both in intellectual traditions and in material aspects such as economics, culture, science, and technology. In particular, US, a superpower, is set to dominate the world through its military and economic power, but alongside this, it's dominated through intellectual creation and ideological culture is also considered to be significant. the US perceives a sense of arrogance like superiority towards developing countries, it may be a cause of humiliations and opposition to it. If we neglected the problem of inequality of pride and focus only on economic aspect or democratizations, we may damage it self-esteem of the developing country, which may in turn lead to a worsening of the situation. I suppose that inequality of pride is lacking in the world. IS has been destroying historical buildings and stone statues on the grounds, and they lead to idolatry, which Islam forbids, among other things, and the ruin of Palmyra were destroyed in the process. All Muslims sing in the West a form of polytheism, or the worship of money, gratification, and sex, violence, noise, and the extraneous or violent denial of all spirituality in all morality, all transcendence, which forms a denial of religion. They recognize that this is a chain around this consciousness. The situation goes against the Islamic teaching that all men are equal before God, and the movement has arisen to return to tradition in order to solve the problem. This may have been the Islamic rebuild movement that sought to build the idea of society as preached by the founder Muhammad. Boundarism was also intended as an appeal to strengthen the organization central pillars force. There are also indications that they are trafficking culture property through black market channels and using it as a source of funding. Islamic extremism, radical Islamism, is the general term for armed groups among Muslims who resorted to criminal means such as murder, violence, kidnappings to achieve their religious, political, economic goal. It is considered by many Western countries, including Japan, to be an international terrorist organization, as it is believed to have been responsible for the terrorist attack in the United States, Paris, and Brussels. The term jihadist is often used. The Japanese media also uses the term jihadist. For example, the etymology of the word jihad is struggle, strife, effort, and the word has come to refer to any kind of doctrinal jihadist movement. Any human beings can try to join the community of the oneness of God. But according to these ideas and beliefs, everything outside the community is an enemy. Only in the Islamic way of life is man free from servitude, slaves to other men, and will be dedicated only to the worship of God, receiving the guidance only from God and bowing down only before Him. Anyone who tries to keep the Islamic community away from its religious must be a Jewish stooge. International culture and common heritage that seems to transcend religious, radicals, and national barriers and consider one of the approach hatched by Jewish people of the world and an attempt to infiltrate the nations of the world and perpetuated their evil flame. At apex of this evil shames are the loan sharks through whom the wealth of the world will be placed in the hand of the Jewish financial institutions. I suppose that human society and the Islamic movement are made up of pure piety, similar to how the nation and German National Socialism Nazism is made of pure lace. Terrorism itself, in the context of a social protest against popular misery and elite corruptions, leads to a fear of Islamic statecraft. Terrorism is perpetuated and incomprehensions of rich nations, which are the same ones here in the ideological struggle that widely interpreted this phenomenon as mere retributions of the rich for the lag-crud bastards. On the economic, this is seen in the context of developing economy, which governs the Islamic world, brings with an imbalance between North and South. On the political, it is the pressure from the tyrannical and authoritarian characters of the regime in place since colonial liberations, as well as pressure from unresolved issues, as in the Palestinian question and the economical sanctions against Iraq. On the social, it is caused by increased in unemployment, social distress, and absence of individual freedoms. Other causes are psychological disappointment, dreams of the better one world, rejection of the materialism, resentment as frustrations, lack of gratitude, and the ease with which one falls, prayers among others. Muslims are just as conscious of being humiliated as they are of being corrupted, and the West, which thinks of Islam as a backward religion, is also corrupted. Humiliation is not the cause of the result. Islamic terrorism is often thought of as a global movement, as if it is a previous example of how injustice in Palestine, Bosnia, Kashmir is a great cause of the what many Muslims endure righteousness. Islamic terrorism is often thought of as a global movement. This is evident in Western countries and mainly in traditional Muslim countries, especially in Africa and the Middle East. It often occurs in instrumentalizations of religion and society and resistance to the state of the age. Near 9 out of 10 terrorism is a weakness of the state, but on the contrary, in the Muslim world, especially ruled by dictatorships, Islam must be a destabilizing factor supposed by violent action. What is the characteristic of radical ideology? Extreme ideology has one thing in common. It is a reliance on violence. Islamic extremist ideology is particularly prone to this. And what we know from IS, documents and international instruction is that they encouraged the use of violence within organizations in order to control certain areas. By punishing people in public and through very brutal methods, they insisted the ideology and the psyche of the population. Let me look back at the criminal act of IS, burning people alive, putting them in cage, and submerging them underwater, throwing them off tall buildings, blowing up people with explosives around their necks, cut off the hands of thieves. The aim of inflicting the maximized terror on people, though these atrocity, massacre, murder, cruelty is to turn society into the pack of cowards. A group of people who obey what they are told without thinking because they fear punishment. There, the law is irrelevant.